you have been proactively learning about AI, and then you created something that then led to these opportunities and this additional revenue stream that you've started, and also an opportunity to have a level of thought leadership in your industry. When you're an entrepreneur, it's often that a lot of things are timing, and also the only way to create opportunities is doing your best to put content and products out there. Hey friends, I'm Caitlin Sapia, and you're listening to AI and Anxious, a show making the AI future less scary, one conversation at a time. Today, I'm super excited to chat with David Dunham, who's done some fascinating work combining AI with construction safety. David manages safety for a massive hydroelectric dam project in British Columbia. But what really caught my attention is how he's turned his AI expertise into additional income streams through the newsletter Construction Industry AI. He also helps other safety professionals leverage AI tools, and he used this expertise to create additional income streams through OHS content development, very niche. He's becoming this amazing bridge between traditional safety management and AI innovation, helping others navigate this new technology thoughtfully. I thought this would be a great chat because we can talk about how you have managed to generate some income by adopting AI technologies and how you're using it in an industry niche like construction. But let's start at the beginning. What got you interested in AI, and what were some of your initial worries or concerns about using it?
Thanks for that, Caitlin. I'd have to say, I just immediately, when I started interacting with ChatGPT, when ChatGPT 3.5 or ChatGPT 3 sort of rolled out as a chatbot, I was just amazed because I'd never interacted with a piece of software that could respond to me and like a human being could. And as I'm somebody who enjoys writing and reading, it was amazing to me that here was a computer that had almost human-like abilities that I could interact with and ask questions of. So I was just immediately amazed. And then being that I'm in health and safety, my mind immediately started going to like, what does this mean for my industry? And
yes,
I originally, one of the first reasons why I felt anxious about it was in the health and safety industry, we do see that there's sort of this proliferation of written documents. And I thought, AI could really go one of two ways. It could make that much worse than it currently is. It could result in a bunch of consultants sort of creating more and more documentation, or it could make that part of the job maybe a little bit easier so that we rely less on that. We're able to do more of that human interaction that we need out in the field. I think that's still playing out right now, but that's probably where I was first sort of anxious about
it. Yeah, okay. That makes a lot of sense. I think a lot of people share that initial spark being the release of, the initial wave of ChatGPT. They had released an API endpoint to like the first versions of ChatGPT in 2020. So software developers were sort of playing around with it from that time. And it wasn't until the public actually got involved a bit more in, mid or late 2023. But it's interesting because even though developers had earlier access, it certainly wasn't a pivotal moment until 3.5, to be honest, because there were a lot of hallucinations and issues. And I think it was more that click in everyone's minds of, oh, hang on a second, we need to really start thinking about how this is going to impact my work and life, because the performance now is, getting to, probably was at an intern or a little bit better level when it was first released. And obviously we've seen it progress quite a bit from there. But I do think everyone, that was a moment for a lot of people, coders and non-coders, of realizing the capability. And definitely that was when AI anxiety hit probably pretty hard. It was a moment of, I think, excitement, of course, and potential, but that was, I think, when the real AI anxiety started.
When was it that Google engineer claimed that he was speaking to like a sentient AI. Do you recall that?
Oh,
There was a famous story of like one particular engineer who was like, yeah, this thing's alive, and he sort of blew the whistle, and then he was
right.
fired. I just remember that
I
happening, and
do
then
remember that. Yes. Yeah, yeah.
it seemed way too early.
That's right. Well, the problem is, and I find a lot of people probably experience this, where you just don't know what is reality and what is fiction. We're all already living in what feels like a sci-fi world now. Just not progressed to the point where we're flying around in hover cars, but certainly there's a lot of weird stuff going on and we just don't know really. So it's hard to say. And obviously those moments are scary, but I mean, that was a little while ago. And I suppose the question is, okay, if that did happen, if there was this sentient AI, what has been the impact? I suppose it's kind of that downstream effect of, if that has happened, why hasn't anything happened so downstream that it's affected the average person's daily life? I think that's probably the question. Even if it did happen, how has it affected everyone else downstream?
Right. Yeah, I just remember
So,
hearing him kind of come forward and then think, you know, and I never really felt that way myself interacting with LLMs, but
hmm,
it was interesting that there's, yeah, like where is the impact on us as sort of the
right.
end user?
Right. Well, yeah, everyone has quite a different experience. I think as well, in particular, I would say in terms of what people are getting the highest level of interaction with AI is like you have, your non-coders, then you have your software engineers, but then you have your machine learning engineers and experts, which are different to people who build software. These are people who have worked with AI models and have been building AI models for a while, they actually get the best kind of output because they actually know how to interact and manipulate a model because they really deeply understand how the underlying model actually works. Whereas to software engineers, it's still a bit of a black box. So I wouldn't be surprised if they got to that level because they probably would be the highest level of understanding of how it actually works, but it's also still a black box. And was the AI just really able to kind of fake that feeling of sentience? How can you actually say if something is sentient or not? How can you know that?
Yeah, it's very
So
interesting.
I know, but anyway. But yes, I think talking about like that moment of excitement and when probably a lot of people's AI anxiety kicked off en masse. I know we've spoken about it before and it's in my course about the AI anxiety spectrum. For those listening, I believe everyone falls on the AI anxiety spectrum somewhere, starting one end of the spectrum in a place of fear and apathy, then kind of in the middle with frustration and uncertainty with not being able to get the results that they want, and then more positively leaning into hope and empowerment when they get more of an understanding of AI and what they can do with it in the future. So, what do you think makes you like the most anxious about AI, and how do you generally manage those feelings like day to day?
I think my general anxiousness like has evolved somewhat. I think
Mm,
originally I kind of thought that, you know, I worried that people would, regardless of the profession, but naturally I sort of focused on the health and safety profession. I felt
mm,
that they were going to just sort of rely on it blindly, and then there would be mistakes, and they wouldn't realize that, you know,
mm,
the propensity it has towards hallucination and things like that.
mm,
And then as I saw, like a lot of people just chose to, as I saw that it actually was quite easy to detect when somebody was using a large language model to write, you can identify that sort of writing. And
yes.
I also noticed that like, my use through using it, I learned that it's like, you really need to be in the driver's seat when you're using it, and you can't rely on it to
Mm,
give you a set of facts about the world.
mm,
You really
mm,
just, you have to be the holder of the knowledge.
mm,
My anxiety kind of shifted to, okay, well, what does this mean longer term? And
mhm,
like, what does this, you know, like a lot of people in sort of white collar professions, what does this mean for my job? What does this mean for my industry? And I think I still have some of those concerns long term. but
Hmm.
they're a little bit tempered now because as I follow, what's going on with AI developments, there is a lot of hype, but a lot of that
Yes.
hype doesn't match what we're seeing as, in terms of tools and use cases. Uh,
Mm,
and it feels like we have just more time to adapt than some of the, the big people,
for
the big
sure.
hype people would want you to believe. They sort of
Yeah.
think like AGI is
The
coming to
FOMO
take
is
over your
real.
job tomorrow. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
But I think we have some more time, and the more you can either decide to like play with it and find ways to make yourself more productive or engage with it, or you can ignore it. But I think that's very dangerous as well.
Yes, yes, I totally agree. I think when we feel anxious about AI, we're often just trying to push that feeling away of the anxiety. But what if that anxiety is actually our professional intuition sending us important alerts? The real skill isn't about silencing the anxiety, it's learning to use that as a guide for innovating thoughtfully. I feel when you ignore it, anxiety in of itself, if used too much and at too much of an extreme, then yes, it doesn't benefit you, and often that leads to negative outcomes. But I think if you use it as an alert or as a compass, as a initial catalyst to go a bit deeper into AI and notice, okay, yes, I'm feeling a bit uncertain because it is such an uncertain space, but yes, I have time to dive into these tools. I need to look at the opportunities instead of, yeah, just this blind fear of it's going to take over. I have no power in this situation. Therefore, I'm going to bury my head in the sand or yeah, just flippantly use it without actually understanding how to use it in an effective way. And to your point, that using it lazily, I think, is where people come undone as well, lazily using it without fact checking or even taking the time to imbue their own tone of voice particularly in content creation too, which I think is a good segue actually into when you're looking at the opportunities in AI. It's really interesting your journey that you have been able to get involved in this newsletter because you've taken more of a proactive approach in learning AI and applying it to your industry. How did that kind of work? Because other people would definitely be curious as to how they could utilize AI to create more opportunities for themselves.
Yeah. So the newsletter was kind of fluke.
No,
Early
don't
on
say
when I
that.
started experiment. Well, the opportunity, it was an opportunity that came out of nowhere. Let me say that. So
Okay.
a fluke in a positive sense. I think that like, so early on when I started playing around with AI, I had this curiosity about it. I wrote an article and I said, that just sort of discussed what the implications of this technology might be on me and this industry.
Hmm.
And that article led to a podcast interview, and that podcast interview led to this newsletter, the publisher of this newsletter reaching out to me to be a contributing
Mm-hmm.
author. And so I started contributing articles. I started getting paid to contribute articles to this newsletter. And that had two great effects. So it was like, yes, I got paid, I was getting some extra income, but I was also forced to stay up to date on what was going
Yes.
on with AI and keep
Mm-hmm.
playing with it and finding new
Yes.
ways to use it.
Yes.
And that's sort of grown. Like this morning, I had a conversation with a company on, how they can use sim theory within their,
Mm.
day-to-day
Nice.
tasks and stuff like that. So
Nice.
yeah, it's just, there's been some serendipity there that I think just like talking about it and being an enthusiast,
Mm.
showing people, hey, it's not just like, tell me how to do this thing safely. It's more like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, let's create an e-learning and help me think like a
Mm.
instructional designer, right?
Mm.
Help vet my work and help me understand how to use this particular piece of software. And it's
Mm.
sort of coaching you along the way rather than actually creating the content on its own and you just accepting it.
Right. Yeah. Is there obviously, I don't want you to spill your secret sauce or anything like that, but when you're creating this article, which led to that opportunity, is there a particular way that you use AI models or if there are any specific models prompting or otherwise, or data that you feed into it that helps it become a writing companion, not just a, set and forget type setup.
Yeah. So my process for writing an article will tend to be like, yeah, well, it tends to follow this pattern. I experiment with AI.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I want to use AI to help me build a little piece of code or something that I can use to perform a safety operation. And I would do that
Mm-hmm.
in, say, like, ChatGPT's Canvas or
Mm-hmm.
Claude's projects function,
Mm-hmm.
or sorry, what artifacts function. And then I would begin just writing about that, how I did that and where I might use that as a health and safety professional. And
Mm-hmm.
then along the way, I would use, I would share my screen with an LLM, typically through SimTheory, and
Mm-hmm.
let it know what I was writing, let it see the screenshots I had, and then ask it to help me, where could I take this? Where could I take this piece of
Mm.
writing? If I was stuck, it was kind of great for writer's block,
Yep.
and then also great for helping me once I always enjoyed the writing process to be my own. So I want to write the bulk of the article. But
Okay.
then when it comes to refining it and, concluding it or working on some of the formatting elements, I would just sort of use AI as my writing partner
Mm.
and bounce ideas back and forth off of it.
Nice.
Uh,
Okay.
so it's very helpful that way.
Yeah, so you're almost using it as a ghost writer in a way, or a Q&A editor in the end phase versus taking the creative wheel at the start.
Typically, there were times like, so I was I was writing 2 articles a month. So there were times when it became hard to come up with ideas,
Right,
right?
right.
And so I would go to a large language model and say, hey, here's my body of work. Here's what I've been working on. Now I need to keep writing more. So give me some more ideas along the same sort of the same sort of way that I think, same sort of way that I sort of see the world.
Hmm.
Give me some ideas. And sometimes those ideas would be useful and worth following up. But often, and I think users of large language models will find that they aren't always the most creative, and they kind of follow a similar, you can hear their writing be described as sort of like anodyne, right? It lacks sort of depth and character sometimes.
Definitely.
So I would use it as a bit of inspiration, like to help me explore an idea. um, but the majority of the articles were inspired by me just experimenting with it, playing with
Hmm.
it, and finding ways that it would help me in my day-to-day work. Like,
Hmm.
and it helped me discover things like how good it was at Excel formulas, how good it was
Mm.
at, you know, I was volunteering for my son's hockey game, and I took a picture of like the old 1970s scoreboard machine, and it's falling apart. The faceplate is sort of discarded and torn up. And I took a picture of it and I said, I need to know how to use this. And it was like, yeah, that's the XL 500, and here's how you use it. And so, that has immediate implications for safety, right? We could
Yes.
take photos of things and instantly get coaching on how to use them. And that was really
Yes.
powerful. So just playing with it really helped.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I certainly agree. Very specific. It's really good at some use cases, and the vision component that you're talking about is incredibly powerful, especially married with, the knowledge and the smarts of an LLM. I think it's really interesting that your journey was very much you took a deep interest in AI. You have been proactively learning about AI, and then you created something that then led to these opportunities and this additional revenue stream that you've started, and also an opportunity to have a level of thought leadership in your industry. When you're an entrepreneur, it's often that a lot of things are timing, and also the only way to create opportunities is doing your best to put content and products out there. They talk about being an entrepreneur is very much like being a wave surfer. So you'll be sitting out in the surf waiting for a wave, and the difference between a good entrepreneur and just the average person not investing in entrepreneurship is when that wave does come, you know how to ride it, whereas someone without any experimentation or experience or capability in entrepreneurship will just never be able to catch that wave. So yes, a lot of it is timing, and I think that's a really great demonstration of how timing and just putting yourself out there is. You can't really predict how life will go in so many ways. You know, I think about the best things that have happened in my career and even in my personal life. I could have actually never predicted them happening, and I didn't necessarily plan, but I built the skills and I put things out there and I iterated and experimented and taught myself a lot of skills that have just resulted in being able to capitalize on opportunities that end up coming. So I think that's actually it's not so much luck. It's luck in the timing and it's luck in the connection of the opportunity. But if you hadn't have put that article out there, that never would have happened. You know what I mean? So
Definitely. I love the analogy, even though I'm from northern BC and I'm a terrible surfer, but
I can't
I
surf
do
either,
say
but it's okay.
it's hard. It's harder than it looks.
Mm,
But yeah, you're right. You got to put yourself out there, and then it helps to be really genuinely interested in it as well. And I
yes.
think like there's so many ways. I just wanted to mention too, like there's so many ways to engage with artificial intelligence that like I got to be careful because it starts to sound like your primary friend circle is the AI and not real people. But like I would even walk my dog and have conversations with ChatGPT's voice agent
Mm,
about
yes.
articles or ideas I wanted to explore.
Mm,
And that was really helpful too. So it's like, hey, I have this thought, and often
mm,
we get our best ideas when we're out having a walk, right?
totally. And shower thoughts. Don't forget shower thoughts.
Yeah, I haven't chatted with AI in the shower yet, but definitely when I'm out walking, and it was like you'd have these long conversations. Often it was like, okay, well, there's nothing really fruitful that came from that, but occasionally you would
Mm,
get a really good thread, and it would say, that's an interesting idea you have. Maybe we should take it in this direction. And you're like, oh, that's great. I wouldn't have thought about that on my
mm,
own. And that's where you're
mm.
kind of like, wow, this is really powerful.
Definitely. Yes. And it comes back to, again, I think it's a matter of assuming that the conversation you're going to have with this AI colleague or AI co-pilot just isn't going to give you anything, therefore you don't try it. But oftentimes, even I do that sometimes where I think, "Oh, well, I can't think of the solution. I've been at this for days or hours, and I can't imagine how an AI companion is going to help me in this particular problem." And sometimes I'm right, sometimes it doesn't, and I'm kind of stuck. But there are, I would say, 60 to 70% of the time, it at least gives me an ability to think in a different direction, and just having that, like the diversity of thought phenomenon that we have, where it's just, you just need a slightly different angle or a slightly different perspective, and having that on tap, having that 24/7 access to AI is incredible, because I actually have my ideas later at night. And so outside of office hours, meaning no one would really even be able to talk to me about, like, my coaches and my mentors and people I often talk to for advice, they're not going to be happy with me calling them at 11 p.m. at night. I mean, some of them are okay with it, but most of them aren't. So being able to have that immediate back and forth, especially as an entrepreneur, where ideas will just come out of nowhere, and inspiration is very hard to time. I find it's really useful. I use, my AI companion a lot in terms of brainstorming, thinking about specialist skills as well, because I personally am not the best with digital marketing. So I lean on AI quite a bit with that. And even my English teacher when I was in high school said my English was really bad and that I would never be an A student So obviously that stuck with me for years, but she didn't see AI coming, did she? So
Who
my
needs it?
writing skills, who needs it? It's fine. So that's been a massive thing for me because I think a lot of people are in the same boat where they just couldn't even create the amount of content and idea generation. And yeah, writing code as well has become more accessible to non-coders, and just being able to learn at your level too is something that I've found is really quite a game changer for me in terms of how I use AI.
Totally. And I love that accessibility part because it's like, one of the things I'm envious of people who can write code because I see them as able to, you can create these wonderful tools to solve unique problems. And I would love to be able to do that. And now I can. And then, yeah, I look at people within, the safety profession who have just an incredible skill set out in the field, talking to workers, engaging with people and coaching people. But when it comes to sitting down at the desk and writing a report, they don't maybe have that same strength with the
Right.
written language. And it's just great that they can use this tool to
Yes.
help enhance.
Yes, I agree. I really think
Right.
that AI can help us with a lot of what would have been considered before our limitations or weaknesses. And so that's
Yeah.
where I feel the elevation of our capability is really there. And I was talking to someone the other day about their predictions for the next 10 years in AI, which I'm going to ask you to, but we'll get to that in a second. And they were saying, well, the most human things that it will come down to is then creativity and interpersonal skills, because that's what humans do best. And I do think that in those skills that AI can even further enhance both of those elements too. So I do agree with him, but it's hard, obviously, to predict what's going to happen in the next decade. But what do you think? I'd be curious to know.
Yeah, that's a incredibly difficult question to answer. And but I'll try my best. I think we're still going to see this sort of incremental progress. Well, I shouldn't say incremental because progress has happened quite rapidly. But since those first days when I experimented with the first publicly available ChatGPT chatbot, up until now, I think what we've seen is, yes, the models have improved. They're more reliable, and there's a lot more sort of tools built upon them, and it's easier to use them and to engage with them. So I think we'll continue to see progress in that domain. And then one of the things that I think we'll see massive improvements in the next few years is this whole idea of the AI actually controlling your computer station. And I mean, I'm stealing that idea a lot from the guys over at Sim Theory, but
Yeah. This Day in AI
it,
podcast.
this yeah, this day in
Chris,
AI,
Chris and Mike, legends.
it's hard not to see how they're not onto something, at least in the midterm, is that our computers will have the option to run our computers using AI agents. And you follow from that, say that happens reliably and with quite skillfully in the next 3 to 4 years. Following from that, it's hard not to see that there's going to be a disruptive component to that in the professional world. And that gives, here we are back at anxiety again, right? So it's like, if
Full circle.
the AI can control my computer reliably as a safety professional, just use that as a scenario. Well, maybe that frees me up a lot. Maybe my days are out in the field and I'm just simply sending messages back to an inbox and,
Right.
voice recordings, all kinds of data back to some repository somewhere. And then I come back to my computer and all I have to do is proofread this report and send it out. And I do think we will continue to see that need for that human element out in the field, out interacting with people, because there's probably humans don't want to live in a surveillance state, right? That is one potential future in my
Yes.
profession, that we have cameras sort of floating around everywhere, and they're overseeing the world, and they're monitoring for compliance, and they're stopping things when they're getting out of line. So, but I don't. I think there would be resistance to that. So I think there will still always be the need for professionals to deliver the message and sort of curate the message and choose what needs to be said and what doesn't need to be said. And that's a human thing. And then I think if we go out further, what's really, really exciting to see is how this same technology is influencing robotics and
Mm,
how we might see like this rapid progression in robotics technology. And I'm getting out of my realm of knowledge here, but it just makes sense to me from what I've seen of like these MIT dogs and some of the videos I've watched on them, how they're
mm,
learning through similar principles to how the large language models learn in virtual environments,
mm,
where they're able to sort of like iterate on these different actions and get better and better. And then with that, we might see robots in the workplace on a much larger scale
mm,
than we currently do. And
yes.
maybe within 10 years, we start to see that more often than we do. And that's sort of my predictions for the.
Yeah, I love it. I do agree with a lot of those sentiments. And I'm just really excited because I really do think that humans, we're not designed for monotonous, repetitive work. We're just not. We are more that creative and interpersonal beings. That's where we thrive. So I really think that, yes, there's going to be a lot of change, and change is often scary, especially with AI and how many people don't understand how it works and how it can work for them. But I really, really believe that it's actually going to alleviate a lot of suffering when it comes to work. How many people out there get exhausted and frustrated with so many elements of their job, would love to be able to more rapidly be able to complete tasks that are so draining, because they're not creative and because they're not high level tasks. Yes, the change will be scary, but I really think that we will actually enjoy work more and be able to do more meaningful things and have more space to also just be better humans. Because if you're grumpy and frustrated with your job, you're coming home and bringing that frustration to your families, to friends, and you just don't have enough capacity in your life to actually live, uh, a good life, I think. So I'm quite excited for it, and I really enjoyed those predictions. Thank you, David. And then we'll end. I really have enjoyed this whole conversation, just by the way. I think you've got some really great insights, and I think our audience will really enjoy a lot of this. And I do want to say that I think it's fascinating that the people making these potentially passive income or additional income and opportunities with AI aren't usually the ones screaming about it on social media. They're the ones that have found their niche and quietly started building, and that you didn't let your AI anxiety freeze your ability to look at opportunities. Instead, you just got started and didn't shy away and were able to make opportunity for yourself from that perspective. So, David, the last question I have for you is, what's a problem you wish you could solve with AI right now? So my example is, I would love for AI to somehow be able to do all of my domestic chores. I imagine like a Wallace and Gromit future for myself, because that's something that just does my head in. So what do you wish that AI could solve for you right now? It can be personal or professional.
I have a professional example that comes to mind, and it involves, so what I do in my day job as safety manager on this project, I have to do a lot of reporting. I have to report up about the project and out to people and inform people of what's going on with our safety performance. And AI can certainly help me currently today, but what I would really like is to have the ability to share everything I can with the AI and not have concerns about privacy. So
Mm,
I can't wait for the day to come when the company I work for owns the model or is confident enough in the
mm,
model that they don't have any concerns about who's stealing the data or who might be looking at the data. They're okay with
yep.
that, and I can feed it everything that they have, and it's
Yes.
knowledgeable of the entire enterprise. And then I think it'll be so powerful at that stage for people within
Mm,
companies, because that's another area where we're sort of held back and restrained. And I think that's what I really wanted to solve for me right now is I wanted to know everything about the company and everything about what I'm doing and help me do those reports.
yes. Amazing. I agree. So you're able to have unlimited context and data, proprietary data, put into a model and have no concerns about how that may affect the company and worries about the privacy of data in the future. I completely agree. If we could put all of the data that we wanted to into these models, they would be much more powerful, but certainly it is a massive concern with regards to privacy, and it's also just not feasible to be able to run these AI mega towers locally as well. So I think we'll eventually see a bit more accessibility in terms of using more open source models and on cheaper hardware. I mean, we already have seen with DeepSeek that there is a possibility to be able to create models for a lot less resources and not have to run it on the highest spec hardware as well. So I do think we'll see a lot more of that as the years go on, and just generally how humans have progressed technology in the past. We will just see higher performance, lower cost. It's just a matter of what that timeline looks like. No one knows, but I think it's fairly certain that we will keep progressing at a pretty exponential rate at this stage.
Yeah, I agree. And the trust will go up as well. We'll see large organizations. Like, one of the issues with the company I work for, we run into is wanting to have a lot of the data stored within our country on servers in our country.
Right, of
And
course.
yeah, it's only a matter of time before we'll have confidence in one of the big players that, if their servers are secure and we can share that data with them. And I know professionally, like, a lot of my colleagues, whenever I bring up AI, that's one of the first things they say is, well, you got to be careful. You can't give it any personal information about, safety incidents, things like that, or about
Yes.
your company. And I just love if we didn't have to have that conversation, because we don't have that conversation when we ask Google something, right?
Right.
So it would just be nice if we had that problem figured out.
Very true. I also look forward to that. Well, thank you so much, David. This has been a really great episode. Let's wrap up by shamelessly plugging anything you want to right now. And then, we will leave our listeners with some food for thought, I think.
Yeah, so you can check out some of my writing at constructionindustryaI.com. And I have a website, pragmaticsafety.ca, where I post some other blogs and things like that, working on some AI related tools. And I think that's pretty much all the shameless plugging I need.
Great. So good. And David's a learner of my Gen AI Jumpstart course. So I will also put that links, and I'll put David's links in the show notes. But thank you again. Yes, until next time, my AI nerd curious friends.
Thanks, Caitlin. It's been great.
What are we saying to each other?
It seems they're trying to teach us a basic tonal vocabulary.
It's the first day of school, fellas.